Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. We're here to cut through the noise, really distill the crucial info, and give you those surprising facts you need to be genuinely informed.
Absolutely. And today, we're tackling a really massive piece of legislation.
Huge. It's got this nickname, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, but officially it's H.R. 1.
That's the one. It's seriously comprehensive, over 900 pages.
Wow.
Yeah. And it covers just about everything.
Yeah.
We're talking immigration, taxes, government spending, and, well, whole host of other conservative policy goals.
And you've pulled together some great sources for us. We've got PBS News, Forbes, then deeper dives from places like Pew Research, Brookings, the Peterson Foundation.
And a key analysis from the Wall Street Journal, too.
Okay. So our mission today is to unpack what's actually in this thing, look at the potential impacts, and really give you the core insights to understand what's truly at stake.
Let's do it.
All right. So the big picture first. This bill, it squeaked through the House, right? Like super narrow margin.
Incredibly narrow, 215 to 214. And now it's landed in the Senate for what's likely going to be a pretty intense debate.
And they're aiming to use this budget reconciliation process.
Exactly. That's the key strategy here.
Explain that a bit for us. Why is that important?
Well, budget reconciliation, it's a special legislative pathway. It's mainly for bills affecting federal spending or revenue.
Okay.
The crucial part is it lets the Senate get around the usual 60-vote filibuster rule. So this massive bill could potentially pass with just 51 votes, a simple majority.
Which makes it a very powerful tool if one party controls things.
Precisely. It allows for pushing through really far-reaching policies without needing bipartisan buy-in.
Got it. So this isn't just a random collection of ideas then. It sounds like a deliberate blueprint.
Oh, absolutely. It's a sprawling collection of Republican priorities. And the design, pretty explicitly, is to significantly transform the U.S. government and the economy.
We're talking major shifts in immigration, big tax cuts, rolling back federal spending.
And a lot of other key conservative initiatives, yeah.
Now, what's interesting is this connection people are drawing to Project 2025.
Right. That's a broader conservative roadmap. And even though the president has, publicly kept some distance from Project 2025 itself, the sources we look at, like the Wall Street Journal, point out that many of the policies in this bill look, well, almost identical to Project 2025's recommendations.
So despite the public statements, the substance lines up.
It seems that way, according to the analysis. It suggests a really concerted push towards a specific ideological direction across government.
Okay, let's dive into what might be the most talked about part. Immigration. The changes here sound enormous, especially the money involved.
Immense is the right words. The House version alone earmarks roughly $150 billion over just the next 4 years.
$150 billion? For what specifically?
For what sources are calling a mass deportation agenda.
Right.
And the Senate's version, it's talking even more, maybe $350 billion for border and national security.
Wow. How does that compare to current spending, like for ICE?
Well, think about this. ICE's current annual budget is around $10 billion.
Okay.
So we're talking an increase of, 15? Maybe even 35 times that budget. It signals a really profound shift in priorities towards enforcement on a scale we haven't seen.
And a big chunk of that is the border wall, I assume. That's always a signature issue.
Definitely. The bill sets aside $46.5 billion just for that. They call it an integrated border barrier system.
So not just fencing.
No. It includes water barriers, technology. The goal is completing 701 miles of primary walls and 900 miles of river barriers down on the U.S.-Mexico border.
Now, building the wall has been a promise, but does it actually work? I mean, people always talk about tunnels, ladders.
Yeah, the long-term effectiveness is definitely debated. Smugglers have historically been pretty resourceful. Tunnels, ladders, power tools, you name it.
Right.
However, it is worth noting, sources say illegal border crossings have dropped significantly since the president took office.
Why is that?
Well, partly attributed to the suspension of the asylum system. That's had a major impact.
Okay, so beyond the wall itself, what else is in this huge enforcement budget?
A lot. $45 billion is set aside to vastly expand the network of immigrant detention facilities.
Expand how much?
The goal is to go from the current capacity, which is around 41,000 people, up to over 100,000.
Wow, that's more than double.
It's actually an 800% increase in funding compared to FY 2024 levels. It's a huge jump in resources allocated to detention.
And personnel, too.
Yep. Over $12 billion requested for 18,000 new ICE and Border Patrol personnel.
And what's the stated goal behind all this?
Well, ICE's acting director, Todd Lyons, was quoted saying the aim is a deportation system that could function Like Amazon trying to get your product delivered in 24 hours.
And Amazon, that's quite a comparison.
It is. And reports suggest White House aide Stephen Miller is aiming for a quota of maybe 3,000 arrests daily to hit 1 million deportations a year.
1 million a year.
From a conservative viewpoint, this is framed as restoring order, controlling the border, prioritizing national security with a real system for enforcement.
And I guess this is good news for the private prison industry.
Sources suggest it's seen as a significant potential boon for them, yes.
With all this focus on enforcement and detention, what about the immigration courts? They're already swamped, right?
Totally overwhelmed. There's a backlog of over 3.6 million cases. It often takes judges 5 years, sometimes more, just to make a decision.
So does the bill address that?
It does allocate some funds, $1.25 billion, to hire more immigration judges and support staff. The aim is to tackle that backlog.
But is money enough? The system's described as pretty chaotic.
That's the concern. Shortages of translators, many immigrants without lawyers. Plus, recent reports of increased courthouse arrests have apparently spread fear, especially among asylum seekers. It creates a difficult environment.
You mentioned asylum seekers. There are some big changes proposed for fees, aren't there?
Huge changes. And this could create real financial hurdles for people. For the first time ever in the U.S., applying for asylum, which has always been free, would cost $1,000.
$1,000 just to apply?
Yes. Plus, another $550 if you need to apply for work authorization while you wait.
Wow. And appeals?
Appealing a judge's decision. That jumps from $110 now up to $900.
That's a massive increase.
It is. And it extends beyond asylum. Humanitarian programs, parolees, people on temporary protected status, they'd all face substantial new fees, too.
What about unaccompanied children?
For them, sponsors would face a minimum $3,500 initial drum fee, plus an additional $5,000 release fee per child.
Goodness. The argument from the conservative side is what? That people should pay into the system?
Generally, yeah. The framing is often about ensuring users contribute to the costs, maybe discouraging claims they see as lacking merit. But critics obviously argue it just creates a kind of wealth test for people fleeing desperate situations with nothing.
A major barrier.
Potentially, yes.
And doesn't stop with application fees, right? There's more on the financial side.
Correct. The bill introduces a new 3.5% excise tax on remittances. That's money non-U.S. citizens send back home to family abroad.
Okay. And affects tax credits, too.
Big time. It would require Social Security numbers to be eligible for things like the American Opportunity Tax Credit, the Lifetime Learning Credit, and, importantly, the Child Tax Credit.
What's the impact of that?
Well, some analyses suggest over 4.5 million children, most of them actually U.S. citizens, could become ineligible for the Child Tax Credit because their parents might lack SSNs.
Wow. So citizen kids potentially losing out.
That's the projection. And eligibility for other programs like SNAP food stamps and healthcare premium tax credits would also be restricted. Only U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents, green card holders, would qualify.
So a clear policy direction there. Prioritize benefits for citizens and permanent residents only.
That seems to be the clear intent, yes.
Okay, let's shift gears. Let's talk economy, taxes. This seems like another massive pillar of the bill.
Absolutely. Taxes are central. We're looking at roughly $3.8 trillion in proposed tax cuts overall.
$3.8 trillion. What's the main focus there?
A primary goal is making the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent. You know, the current rates and brackets. They're actually set to expire soon.
Right, so this would stop that expiration.
Exactly. But just extending those loans is estimated to cost around $5 trillion over 10 years.
$5 trillion just to keep the status quo on those cuts.
That's the projection, yeah. On top of that, the bill adds new tax breaks. Things like eliminating taxes on tips or on overtime pay, maybe on some car loans.
Okay. Anything else specific?
Yeah, a larger deduction, $6,000 proposed for older adults, a boost to the child tax credit, and the cap on state and local tax deductions, SALT. That would quadruple to $40,000 for 5 years.
That SALT cap change is always contentious.
Very. From the conservative angle, though, all these cuts are framed as ways to boost the economy, encourage investment, let people keep more of their money, strengthen the free market.
But what about the national debt? $3.8 trillion, maybe $5 trillion just for the extensions.
Yeah.
Where does this leave the deficit?
That's the big question. Some analyses we looked at suggest the full package of tax cuts, including interest costs, could add something like $9.1 trillion to the debt over 10 years.
$9 trillion? That's a lot. What did the official scorekeeper say? The CBO.
The Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, the CBO. They estimated the House-passed version would add $2.4 trillion to deficits.
Okay. $2.4 trillion versus $9.1 trillion. Why the difference?
It comes down to how you count things. The CBO score and the bill's proponents don't count extending the existing 2017 tax cuts as a new cost. They call it current policy.
So they assume those cuts were going to happen anyway.
Essentially, yes.
Right.
Critics jump all over this. They call it a fiscally irresponsible budget gimmick.
A budget gimmick.
Yeah, the idea is it's like having a temporary discount you fully expect to make permanent, but you only budget for the temporary cost. Critics say it hides the real long-term financial hit and could lead to fiscal problems later.
Okay, I see. Now, who benefits most from these cuts, according to the CBO?
Their projections suggest the wealthiest households might see an average increase, or tax break, of about $12,000 a year.
And middle-income folks?
Maybe somewhere between $500 and $1,500 as a tax break.
And the poorest?
Conversely, the CBO projected the poorest people could actually face a cost of about $1,600 a year from the legislation overall.
That's interesting. And it ties into something else, doesn't it? Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell made some comments connecting immigration policy to the economy.
He did, yeah, at a recent congressional hearing. It was quite striking. He basically indicated that the administration's deportation policies are partly why U.S. economic growth has slowed down.
How so?
His point was, if you significantly slow the growth of the labor force, which mass deportations would do, you inevitably slow down economic growth.
Fewer workers means less economic activity.
Right. He specifically mentioned losing thousands of workers in key sectors: construction, hospitality, agriculture. Those sectors make up about 15% of the economy.
Then economists generally say immigration helps the economy.
Many do, yes. The thinking is that increasing labor supply through immigration can help manage inflation and contribute to higher growth overall, which you need for a better standard of living.
How does the public feel about all this? Do people think these policies will help or hurt the economy?
It's mixed, but leans toward skepticism on the economics. Our sources show 53% of Americans actually expect these policies will cost taxpayers money, not save it.
Okay.
And 46% believe they'll make the U.S. economy weaker.
But there's another side to public opinion, too.
Yes. By about 2-to-1, Americans also expect these policies will lead to less crime rather than more. So you see a real split depending on what aspect people are focused on, the economics or perceived security benefits.
Okay, this feels like a good place to circle back to that Project 2025 connection you mentioned earlier. The Wall Street Journal said the policies look almost identical.
Right. That analysis highlighted the parallels. Project 2025, developed by the Heritage Foundation, really focuses on this core theme of dismantling the federal bureaucracy.
And you see that reflected in the administration's actions.
Sources indicate about a quarter of the president's executive orders since taking office have zeroed in on, well, tackling the power of the federal government, changing its workforce. It's a consistent philosophical thread.
And wasn't there that move with the U.S. Digital Service, renaming it?
Yeah, that's a concrete example. It was renamed the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE.
DOGE.
And put under Elon Musk's leadership. Its mandate is to help cut the federal workforce, consult on new regulations, scrutinize agency spending.
Sounds very much like that Project 2025 goal.
It really echoes those calls: eliminate duplication, rein in bureaucracy, restore fiscal limits. Sources suggest DOGE has, in some cases, gone even further than Project 2025 proposed, like dismantling USAID entirely.
USAID, the foreign aid agency.
That's the one. From a conservative perspective, this is all about making government leaner, more efficient, more accountable, cutting what they see as waste and unnecessary layers.
And there was another area of alignment with Project 2025 mentioned. Something about wokeness.
Yes, that's another significant overlap. About 10% of the administration's executive orders reportedly aim to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI initiatives.
Where? Just in government?
Across the board, it seems. Government, schools, even the private sector. This directly mirrors Project 2025 proposals to end federal DEI programs.
And the focus instead is on
recruiting federal workers based strictly on merit, explicitly not considering factors like race, sex, or religion. The stated goal, according to sources, is to get the wokeness out of government.
Why? What's the reasoning given?
The idea seems to be to prevent agencies from potentially resisting or undermining the administration's agenda due to ideological differences.
Okay, so we have massive enforcement spending, huge tax cuts. The inevitable question is, how does the bill propose to pay for some of this or offset the costs?
Right. The bill includes some significant proposed spending cuts, mainly targeting long-running government programs. Think Medicaid and SNP, which used to be called food stamps.
What kind of cuts?
A big one is imposing new work requirements. 80 hours a month for many adults getting Medicaid, or SNAP.
Who would that affect?
It includes older people up to age 65 and also parents whose youngest child is 14 or older. There's also a proposed new $35 copayment for Medicaid services.
And the justification for these changes?
Republicans generally argue it's about right-sizing these safety net programs, encouraging work and self-sufficiency, and rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. That's the common phrasing.
But what would the impact be on people relying on those programs? Does the CBO have estimates?
They do. The CBO projected that under the House bill, at least 10.9 million more people would end up without health coverage.
10.9 million, wow. And for food stamps?
An estimated 3 million more people wouldn't qualify for SNAP. So potentially a pretty significant shift in who receives benefits from the federal safety net.
Are there other major spending cuts proposed?
Yes. Another big area is energy. The bill proposes a dramatic rollback of the Biden-era green energy tax breaks.
Like for electric vehicles?
Exactly. And it also aims to phase out or completely terminate various production and investment tax credits for renewables, wind, solar, that kind of thing.
And the conservative argument there is?
Usually it's framed as reducing government subsidies, letting the market decide which energy sources succeed, rather than having the government pick winners through tax policy.
So how much savings are expected from cutting Medicaid, S&P, and these green energy programs?
Sources project that, combined, those cuts are expected to generate savings of at least $1.5 trillion.
So beyond the huge immigration and economic pieces, are there other, maybe smaller priorities tucked into this 900-page bill?
Oh, yeah, it's a real collection. It touches on various other distinct social and cultural policies, too, reflecting that broader conservative agenda.
Like what? Give us a few examples.
Okay, well, there's a proposal to establish something called Trump accounts for children, potentially with a $1,000 deposit from the Treasury.
Interesting. What else?
There's funding earmarked for a National Garden of American Heroes, a project to honor historical figures. There's also a proposed excise tax on large university endowments.
Taxing universities. Okay. Anything else stand out?
Well, there are some specific restrictions on certain types of artificial intelligence development and provisions that would block transgender surgeries.
So really hitting on some key social conservative issues there, too.
Exactly. Things like limiting access to gender-affirming care. It really shows how comprehensive this bill is. It's not just economics and immigration. It's a wide-ranging policy statement.
So there you have it, a pretty deep dive into this One Big Beautiful Bill Act. It's clear from the huge immigration overhaul and those mass deportation goals
to the sweeping tax cuts and those significant spending reductions in social programs and green energy.
This legislation is really aiming for a massive transformation.
No question. And that razor-thin vote in the House, plus the debates now heating up in the Senate, especially over those, let's say, controversial accounting methods for the cost.
Yeah.
It just highlights the intense political dynamics. Republicans are clearly pushing hard and fast to try and deliver on a whole slate of campaign promises. It's about fundamentally trying to realign how government works and its role in the economy.
So given everything we've unpacked, the sheer scope of this bill, the strong reactions it provokes, maybe take a moment to consider what parts of this deep dive might hit closest to home for you? What could have the biggest impact on your daily life or maybe on the country's future path?
Yeah, it really does feel like a potential turning point in policy, with ripple effects that could last for a long, long time, affecting the economy, social safety nets, individual rights.
We hope this deep dive has given you a clearer, perhaps more nuanced view of the significant potential changes that might be just over the horizon.